Hi everyone, in this video we're going to install Windows 10 onto a virtual machine using Virtualbox. What we're going to do in this video is first of all start by opening Virtualbox, then we're going to create a virtual machine. After that we'll set up the virtual machine in terms of how much storage space it will use, how many CPU cores we want it to have, how much memory we're going to allocate to it, and also things like the graphics memory as well. Once we have that done, we'll install Windows 10 onto the virtual machine, and then we'll install the Guest Edition CD to provide some extra functionality. Now there's a couple of things we need to consider before installing Windows 10. Windows 10 itself requires the following in order to work. Now these are bare minimums, but at least a 1 GHz CPU. A minimum of at least 1 GB of RAM if we're installing the 32-bit edition. But in most cases people would probably want to install the 64-bit edition, and that requires a minimum of 2 GB of RAM. It may run in less than that, but it will be very slow. It's also going to need between 16 GB and 32 GB of hard drive space. So your host PC that you're going to run Virtualbox on will need to have at least a dual-core CPU, but preferably a quad-core or better. It also will have to have enough RAM for both the host machine itself and also the guest operating system that you're running. So if you want to have Windows 10 running a virtual machine that is also running Windows 10, you're going to need at least 4 GB of RAM, but preferably more than that. Other operating systems may require less or more RAM, so that's something you need to bear in mind when you're installing. Also, the number of cores that you want to allocate to your virtual machine need to be considered too. Okay, so let's get started. Just going to type Virtualbox. Here we go. Just takes a couple of seconds to load. Okay, so here we go. Now on the left hand side here is where our virtual machines will reside. So I'm going to click New to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to call it Windows 10, strangely enough. And from here we can see that Virtualbox has noticed that we typed in Windows 10, and so it's automatically chosen Windows as the operating system type. It needs to know the type so that it can properly service the particular operating system, and we've chosen 64-bit. So we go next. I'm going to change the amount of RAM that's allocated to it, in my case for 4096 megabytes, which is 4 GB of RAM. I have 16 GB, so there's plenty of space left for my host system. Click Next, and then we're going to create a virtual hard disk. The virtual machine needs to have its own hard disk. Now it's only essentially a file on your hard disk, but it treats it like a hard disk. So we go Create, and I'm going to stick with Virtualbox's own disk format, which is a VDI, or Virtualbox disk image. Click Next, and here it says, do we want to choose a dynamically allocated disk or a fixed size disk? So a dynamically allocated hard disk file will only use space on your physical hard disk as it fills up to a maximum fixed size, although it will not shrink again automatically when space on it is freed. So for example, if you create a 100 GB hard disk, it won't actually take up 100 GB unless all the files that you save on it take up 100 GB. It only takes up what it needs, but can grow up to 100 GB in size. And this is a nice option, because if you were to use fixed size, it would take up a lot of space on your hard disk, and every time you create a new virtual machine, it's going to take up that size again, so you'll quickly run out of space. So dynamic is good. It's a little bit slower than fixed, but for most purposes it's fine. So we click Next. Now it's wanting to know where are we going to store this virtual disk. So it's created a Virtualbox folder in my folder, so that's fine. I'm going to go with that. And I'm just going to give it the size of 100 GB. I'm not actually going to use that, but it allows me to install software and so on, so it gives me a bit of space. So then I'm going to click Create. And here we go. We have our virtual machine shown here on the left. It says powered off at the moment, and over here we can see the settings for it. Now we still have to change a few settings, so let's have a look first at the general. option. Actually, we'll just click on the settings button up here. Okay, so now we can see that under General, the name is Windows 10, the type is Windows, and we've already set these. We can click on Advanced though, and in here there's an option for sharing the clipboard between the host machine and the guest operating system. Now I'm going to set that to bidirectional. It allows us to copy files backwards and forwards between the two. I'm not going to bother with disk encryption. You could do that if you wanted to, but for most purposes you don't really need to. You could type a description in here, it might be useful. But I'm just going to put sample Windows 10 install. Okay, so the next thing then we go to System. We've already set the amount of memory. Now it's giving an option for a floppy drive here. We don't need a floppy drive. We're going to leave the optical drive there because we're going to use that to install Windows. And we're not going to choose to boot from the network. We can leave these settings as they are. They will pretty much work for most situations. I'm going to go to Processor though, and I have the Xeon CPU on this particular machine, so it has 4 cores or 8 threads, so I can afford to give it maybe a second CPU. And I'm also going to install or enable PAE NX, physical address extensions. This may make a little bit of a difference in performance. Under acceleration then, we can leave it as it is under the defaults. If you have problems, you can always try and adjust these to see if it makes any difference. Next we have display. I have a 4 GB graphics card in it, so I'm going to leave that at the highest setting. And I'm also going to enable 3D acceleration. I can bring this up again, I should be able to bring it up. Okay, and that allows it to run a little bit faster graphically. The next thing we're going to pick is storage. And under storage, this represents the system itself, and it shows that it has a SATA controller. Now again, it's virtual, but it has a hard drive. It says it's 100 gigabytes. Currently it's 2 megabytes in size, but it will grow as we install Windows onto it. And we also have an optical disk, or an imaginary optical disk. And what we can do is we can load an ISO file, or a disk image file in there, such as the Windows 10 installation disk. So for the moment I'm just going to leave it, I'll come back to it in a minute. So under audio then, it uses the sound driver from Windows that's on the host machine, so that's fine. If we want to take audio input we can, so I might as well take that. Then under network, currently the system is set up to use NAT, or network address translation. And we've also enabled the network adapter. Now you can actually have 4 network adapters, but 1 is fine for the moment. If we need to, we can add another one in later. There are some other settings here, just in terms of the emulation. So as far as Windows is concerned, this network adapter card, this virtual network adapter card, emulates an Intel Pro 1 gigabit network card. And that's its MAC address. So that's fine, we can leave it as it is. Now if we want to be able to interact with other computers or other virtual machines within the same network, we could change this to something called NAT network. But we might do that in another video. So if you want to enable the serial ports, you can. So that will allow you to plug something into the serial port on your host machine, and the guest operating system will see it. And USB, normally you'd want to keep that enabled because you may want to use things like memory sticks or other devices that use USB ports. And there's also an option called shared folders. You can create a folder that's shared between the two machines to allow you to copy files back and forth between them. And then under the user interface, there are some settings here in terms of how the interface looks. And this is actually fine for the moment, so I'm just going to stick with the settings we have here. Feel free to change them yourself though if you want. So okay, we're pretty much good to go. The only thing we need to do now though is to go to storage, select the optical drive, and then choose a disk file to put in. So I've installed a few things here before, but I'm going to choose a disk file. And I'm going to go to Windows, and I've downloaded the Windows installation disk from Microsoft. I'll pick that. Now we're pretty much ready to go. So I'm going to click OK, and now our machine is ready to go. So if we click Start, it will start up the process. So this is like turning on a PC for the first time. It won't have an operating system installed on it. Okay, so again it's just asking us for the optical disc. We can just pick that, click start, and I'm going to change the view in a second so it'll become bigger and easier for you guys to see. I'm going to change it to scaled mode, and if you need to go back you can press right control and C and it brings it back to the normal mode. But scaled is nice because it allows me to open it up. I can either stretch it like this to the different sizes, or I can click the maximize button. So I'm using up the full screen area. Now it can take a little while for Windows to start, or the installation to start. Okay, here we go. So it's asking us which language to use. Now, when we're doing the installation, we only have the choice of English UK. Now that will depend on the version of the disk you download. Time and currency format. I'm in Ireland, so I'm going to choose English Ireland. Here we go. And Irish as the keyboard. It's the same as the UK keyboard. So then we click next. And the next thing we do is click the install now button. So this can take a little while. So what I will do during some of these periods where it can be a little bit slow is I'll pause the video and then restart again once that part is finished. Okay, here we are. So at this point it's asking us, do we have a product key so we can activate Windows? I don't have a product key at the moment because we're only doing a test install and I don't really want to use a product key. So I'll just click I don't have a product key. You can always put the product key in afterwards anyway. And I'm going to pick Windows 10 Pro as the version that I want to install. Okay, next we get the license agreement. So I suggest having a read of that, and then when you're happy you can click accept the license terms and click next. Now we're not doing an upgrade install because this is a blank machine, so we're going to do custom and install Windows only. Now here it says, where do you want to install Windows? Well, it's showing us that we have drive 0, which is the first drive on the machine. It's the only drive on the machine. And it's saying that it's 100 gigabytes in size, and we have 100 gigabytes free. And it's set as unallocated space, which means that it doesn't have a file system on it yet as such. So we want to install Windows right there. That's perfect. We let Windows sort that out, and we just click next. So now it's going to start copying the Windows files from the installation media onto the hard disk. When it's finished doing that, then it's actually going to start doing the install. So this can take maybe 5 minutes or so. So again, I'm just going to pause the video until it's just about done. Okay, at this point Windows is just going to restart, so it continued the install process. Make sure when Windows reboots that you don't press any key, otherwise it may try to install Windows all over again. Again, this can take a few minutes, so just sit back and relax. You may find that this section takes 10 or 15 minutes, so don't worry, it will finish eventually. Again, don't press any key, otherwise you'll start the Windows installation again. Now, finally, after a little wait there, we need to choose what country we're in. So it's automatically picked Ireland. That's where I am, so that's fine. I'll click yes. Now, the keyboard layout is Irish. It's the same as the UK layout. We click yes. Do we want a second keyboard? Not at the moment, so we're going to skip that. Now, another few minutes of waiting coming up. So I'm just going to pause it again, and we'll continue when it's finished. And yet another restart. Now in this installation we're going to set it up for personal use because it's only going to be a single user using the system. We're not joining it onto a corporate domain. So select set up for personal use and then click next. Now we're going to create an offline account because I don't want to use my personal Microsoft account for this. And they're saying sign in to enjoy the full range of Microsoft apps and services. That's fine, but for this I really just want to have a local account, so I'm going to go limited experience. Now for this I'm just going to put in the name user and click next. Now for the moment I'm going to leave out the password. You can put one in if you want, but then it's going to ask you security questions. So for the moment I'm just going to leave it blank, and then I'm going to put in a password later on after the install. So I'm going to click next. Now there's some screens here where Microsoft asks you a couple of questions about how you'd like Windows to be set up. I don't want to use online speech recognition, so I'm going to choose don't use online speech recognition and click accept. I also don't want apps to use my location, so I'm going to select no. And I'm not really interested in finding my device, so I'm going to select no. With regards to diagnostic data, I'm going to select basic. Inking and typing, I'm going to select no. And I don't really want to get any tailored experiences, so I'm going to select no there as well. I don't want to use an advertising ID, so I'm going to select no. And we'll just wait a couple of moments. Here we go. So do more across devices with activity history. Nope, I don't want that either. Okay, so now your profile is being set up on the machine. So it's creating things like the documents folder and the pictures folder and so on. So I'm just going to pause the video here, and when it's finished we'll start to continue. Now finally we're at the Windows desktop. So we have a nearly complete Windows installation. It may take a couple of moments before you can actually use it though. Okay, and you can see that Windows is still trying to download some applications here, but it's now usable. So that's it, we've installed Windows 10 on Virtualbox. One more thing to do though, and that would be to put in the guest editions CD. And to do that, we need to go to Okay, so Windows is installed, but there's still a couple of things to do. At the moment we're in scaled mode, so in order to be able to select some of the menu options at the top, we need to change back into one of the other views. So we press the host key and the letter C. So press the right control key, hold it down and press C, making sure to select the screen first, and then it changes to this view. So then we go to the devices option on the menu and select Insert Guest Edition CD Image. From here, go to Windows Explorer, click on this PC, and here we have the disk. And we can just click here. user account control is just asking us, do we really want to run this? So we can go yes. And I'm just going to change the view to scaled view again. Okay, and here we have the setup for the guest editions. Click next. Go with the default options, click next. And so we can see that guest editions adds extra support, which may be useful for certain applications. You click install. And it asks us, would you like to install this device software from Oracle? Yes, we do. Install. Okay, so the guest editions is now installed, and now we have to reboot the virtual machine. Now, because we didn't put in a password, Windows boots straight into the desktop. You may want to change this though, as it's not very secure. We'll have a look at how to do that in just a moment. Okay, so to change the password, I'm just going to change back to the normal view rather than scaled view. So to do that, we press right Control and C, and now we have our menu at the top. So what I want to do is press Control Alt Delete to be able to go in and change my password. But in order to do that, if I press Control Alt Delete, it will actually affect the host machine, not the virtual machine. So I need to go to Input and select Keyboard, and then select Insert Control Alt Delete. Now I can select Change Password, and the username of the user we want to change is user that we set. The old password is blank, and we could just put in a new password here. So I'm just going to put in some password. Now normally you'd use a longer password than that because 6 characters is not really enough. But just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just using 6. And then press Enter. Okay, so my password has now been set. I just left the original password blank because there wasn't any password, and pressed Enter. So click OK, and now the next time we restart Windows, we're going to be asked to put in our password. Now it's worth having a look once Windows has been installed, just to see. It's still in the process of downloading a few little apps. Windows tends to do that. But for the moment, I think we've got enough done. And in another video, we'll look at installing Linux onto a virtual machine. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you found it informative. Thank you for watching.